Oh, were you trying to go somewhere? She asked, her voice dripping with mock concern. Yes, Karen, I replied, my voice dangerously calm. I was trying to go to work. You know, that thing people do to earn money and pay for things like parking tickets. Karen shrugged. Well, you weren't using it anyway, she said, parroting her usual excuse. Karen, I said, my patience finally snapping. This is the last time. I have asked you repeatedly not to park in my driveway. I have tried to be reasonable. I have tried to be polite. But you have consistently ignored me, disregarded my property rights, and acted with a level of entitlement that is frankly astounding. I am calling a tow truck. Karen scoffed. You wouldn't dare. It started innocently enough. I glanced out my window one afternoon to see a sleek, silver sedan parked squarely in the middle of my driveway. Now, I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but I do value my space, and my driveway, neatly paved and bordered by my meticulously trimmed hedges, was definitely my space. I waited a few minutes, figuring the driver was just making a quick stop, but the car remained, its presence an unwelcome intrusion on my carefully curated suburban tranquility. Curiosity piqued, I ventured outside, just as a woman emerged from my neighbor's house. She was all sharp angles and perfectly coiffed blonde hair, her designer handbags swinging with an air of self-importance. It was Karen, of course. Karen, with her perfectly manicured lawn, her passive-aggressive HOA newsletters, and her uncanny ability to find fault with anything and everything. Excuse me, I began, trying to maintain a polite tone, but you seem to be parked in my driveway. Karen blinked, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows arching in surprise. Oh, she exclaimed, as if just noticing the 2 tons of metal occupying my property. I was just running in to borrow a cup of sugar from Brenda. I'll be out in a jiffy. And with that, she sashayed back into my neighbor's house, leaving her car firmly planted in my driveway. I stared after her, a mixture of disbelief and annoyance bubbling in my chest. Just running in for a minute, I muttered to myself. Right. This running in for a minute became a recurring theme. It was Karen's catch-all excuse, her justification for repeatedly parking in my driveway, despite my increasingly pointed requests for her to stop. Sometimes it was a cup of sugar. Other times it was a quick chat with Brenda, a forgotten casserole dish, or a spontaneous book club meeting. The excuses were as varied as they were flimsy, each one delivered with an air of entitlement that made my blood pressure rise. It's a free country. I can park where I want, she declared one afternoon, her voice echoing down the street as she sauntered back to her car, which, naturally, was parked in my driveway. There's no sign that says I can't, she retorted another time, her tone dripping with smug satisfaction. You weren't using it anyway, she scoffed on yet another occasion, as if my unused driveway was a public resource ripe for the taking. Each encounter left me fuming, my patience wearing thinner than a politician's promises. It wasn't just the parking, it was the blatant disregard for my property, the lack of respect for boundaries, the sheer audacity of it all. Karen, with her perfectly manicured lawn and her passive-aggressive HOA pronouncements, seemed to believe that the rules didn't apply to her. And the worst part? The HOA, that bastion of suburban bureaucracy, refused to do anything about it. Technically, she's not violating any written rule. The HOA president, a spineless man named Mr. Henderson, informed me with a shrug. There's nothing in the bylaws about unauthorized driveway usage. But it's my driveway, I protested, my voice rising in frustration. It's clearly marked as private property. I understand your frustration, Mr. Henderson replied, his tone oozing with insincerity. But our hands are tied, unless there's a specific rule against it. I stared at him, speechless. The HOA, that self-proclaimed guardian of neighborhood harmony, was essentially giving Karen a free pass to park wherever she pleased. It was a clear case of selective enforcement, a blatant abuse of power, and a testament to Karen's ability to manipulate the system to her advantage. And I, the victim of her driveway thievery, was left with nothing but a growing sense of resentment and a burning desire for revenge. The final straw, the incident that shattered the last vestiges of my patience and ignited the flames of petty revenge, happened on a Tuesday morning. I was running late for work, already stressed about a looming deadline, when I walked out to my driveway to find Karen's car. Again. But this time, it wasn't just parked in the driveway. It was strategically positioned to completely block my car in. It was as if she had deliberately parked her car in such a way to maximize the inconvenience. I seethed, my frustration boiling over. This wasn't just a casual disregard for my property. It was a deliberate act of spite, a calculated attempt to disrupt my life. I banged on Karen's door, my knuckles rapping against the wood with an intensity that surprised even me. No answer. I called her cell phone, voicemail. I even texted her, my message a string of increasingly colorful metaphors for her parking habits. Nothing. I was trapped. My car was imprisoned, a victim of Karen's petty parking tyranny. I called my boss, explaining the situation and offering a string of increasingly implausible excuses for my tardiness. He wasn't amused. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Karen emerged from her house, a smug look plastered across her face. "Oh, were you trying to go somewhere?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Yes, Karen," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. "I was trying to go to work. You know, that thing people do to earn money and pay for things like parking tickets." Karen shrugged. "Well, you weren't using it anyway," she said, parroting her usual excuse. "Karen," I said, my patience finally snapping. "This is the last time. I have asked you repeatedly not to park in my driveway. I have tried to be reasonable. I have tried to be polite. But you have consistently ignored me, disregarded my property rights, and acted with a level of entitlement that is frankly astounding. I am calling a tow truck." Karen scoffed. "You wouldn't dare." "I would." I did. And watching that tow truck driver expertly maneuver her car onto the flatbed, the sound of the metal scraping against the pavement, a symphony of sweet, sweet revenge, was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. Karen, however, did not share my appreciation for the tow truck's artistry. She erupted. It was a full-blown, Oscar-worthy tantrum, complete with stomping feet, flailing arms, and a string of insults that would make a sailor blush. She accused me of being petty, vindictive, and unneighborly. She threatened to call the police, the HOA, and possibly even the United Nations. But her rage was impotent, her threats hollow. Her car was gone, a victim of her own parking hubris. And as I watched her storm back to her house, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury, I knew that the game had changed. This wasn't just about parking anymore. It was about Karen's complete and utter disregard for boundaries, for common courtesy, for basic human decency. And I, for one, had had enough. It was time for payback. Karen's tantrum, her flailing arms and impotent rage as her car was towed, was the final push. The simmering frustration I'd endured for months finally boiled over, transforming into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was done. Done with the excuses, done with the entitlement, done with the HOA's inaction. Karen had declared war on my driveway, and I was going to respond in kind. But I wasn't going to fight dirty. I was going to fight petty. Gloriously, hilariously petty. The idea, born from the depths of my now thoroughly provoked psyche, was simple yet brilliant. A wall. A big, beautiful brick wall, erected precisely at the entrance of my driveway. It was the perfect solution. It was permanent, it was petty, and, most importantly, it was perfectly legal, or at least, I was going to make it legal. The next day, I set about making my vision a reality. First, the research. I delved into the local building codes, zoning regulations, and any other legal document I could find. I needed to ensure that my wall, my monument to petty revenge, was unassailable. I discovered, much to my delight, that there were no specific regulations regarding driveway walls. There were, however, Plenty of rules about landscaping and property beautification. Perfect. Next, the construction crew. I found a local company, Bricks and Mortar, known for their discretion and their ability to interpret regulations creatively. I met with the owner, a grizzled old contractor named Sal, who listened to my plan with a twinkle in his eye. "A wall, eh?" Sal chuckled. "A big one?" "The biggest," I replied, "and it needs to be aesthetically pleasing." Sal's grin widened. "I like your style," he said. "When do we start?" The construction began the following week. The bricklayers arrived, their trucks laden with bricks, mortar, and a shared sense of amusement. They worked quickly and efficiently, erecting the wall with a precision that bordered on artistry. The wall grew taller and wider, a solid, imposing barrier between Karen and my driveway. Karen, of course, was apoplectic. She watched the construction with a mixture of disbelief and fury, her face contorted in a perpetual scowl. She made several attempts to approach the construction site, but the bricklayers, under strict instructions from me, politely but firmly turned her away. The wall itself was a masterpiece of petty engineering, but the pièce de résistance, the cherry on top of my monument to driveway defense, was the gate. Not just any gate, mind you, but a custom-designed wrought iron behemoth, complete with an electronic keypad and a personalized access code. It was a gate fit for a king, or at least a homeowner determined to keep Karen McDictator and her parking tyranny at bay. The gate was a work of art, a swirling masterpiece of black iron, its intricate design hinting at both elegance and impenetrable security. It was large, imposing, and utterly unnecessary, which of course made it perfect. The electronic keypad, nestled discreetly within the gate's frame, glowed a soft blue, a silent promise of exclusive access. And the personalized code? Well, let's just say it was a string of numbers that held a special significance for me, a subtle nod to Karen's parking habits and her general lack of consideration. The installation of the gate was a carefully orchestrated event, timed perfectly to coincide with the completion of the wall. As the construction crew attached the final hinges, I stood back, admiring my handiwork. The wall, solid and imposing, combined with the ornate gate, created a sense of finality, a clear message to Karen that her reign of driveway terror was over. And then Karen arrived. She pulled up in her pristine white SUV, her face a picture of smug satisfaction. She had been away for a few days, presumably recharging her batteries for another round of parking mayhem. She glanced at my driveway, expecting to see, well, I'm not sure what she expected. Perhaps she thought I had simply given up, surrendered to her parking prowess. Her jaw dropped, her eyes widened, her face... Well, her face was a sight to behold. It was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a slow-burning rage that was truly magnificent to witness. She stared at the wall, then at the gate, then back at the wall, as if trying to comprehend the sheer audacity of what I had done. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air. The silence was deafening. It was the silence of Karen's world crumbling around her, the silence of her parking tyranny being brought to an abrupt and hilarious end. And then, the rage. It started as a low rumble, a guttural growl deep in her throat, and quickly escalated into a full-blown tantrum. She stomped her feet. She waved her arms. She shrieked at the wall as if it were personally responsible for her parking woes. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice echoing down the street. "What have you done? You can't do this!" I emerged from my house, a picture of calm and polite indifference. "Good morning, Karen," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Enjoying the landscaping?" Karen glared at me, her face contorted in a mask of pure fury. "Landscaping!" she sputtered. "This isn't landscaping. This is spite." "Spite, Karen?" I feigned confusion. "Whatever do you mean? I'm simply improving my property. Don't you agree? It's quite harmonious." Karen's face was now a shade of purple that rivaled the most vibrant of eggplants. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just stood there, fuming, defeated and utterly speechless. She had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and outpettied, and the wall, my beautiful brick wall, stood as a silent testament to her defeat. Karen, speechless for a moment, finally found her voice. It erupted from her like a volcano, a torrent of indignant rage. "You expect me to believe this wall is for landscaping?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with disbelief. "You've built a fortress. You're deliberately trying to block me out." "Block you out, Karen?" I asked, tilting my head in mock confusion. "But you never needed my driveway, remember? You were always just running in for a minute." I punctuated the phrase with air quotes, a subtle jab at her endless string of excuses. Her face contorted, a mask of fury mixed with a hint of bewildered realization. She sputtered, searching for a retort, but the truth of my words hung in the air like a bad smell. She had always claimed she didn't need my driveway. She had, in fact, vehemently insisted on it. "Well, she stammered. "I need it now. This is outrageous. You must remove this wall immediately." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Karen," I replied calmly, enjoying the flicker of panic in her eyes. "This wall is a permanent landscaping feature. It's all perfectly legal. I have the permits to prove it." Karen, defeated but not deterred, stormed off to her next line of attack, the HOA. Within minutes, Mr. Henderson, the perpetually flustered HOA president, arrived at my doorstep, a copy of the HOA rulebook clutched in his sweaty hand. "Mr. Chris," he began, his voice trembling with a mix of authority and apprehension, "we've received a complaint about your wall. It seems to be obstructing access to, He trailed off, gesturing vaguely towards Karen, who was lurking behind him with a triumphant smirk. "Obstructing access to my own driveway, Mr. Henderson?" I clarified, raising an eyebrow. "The driveway that Karen has repeatedly and illegally used as her personal parking space?" Mr. Henderson blinked, his eyes darting between Karen and me. "Well, yes, but the wall, it's unsightly. It disrupts the community aesthetic." "Unsightly?" I chuckled. "Karen, you've been calling my gnome unsightly for months. Now you're worried about a wall?" Karen sputtered, but I continued, turning back to Mr. Henderson. "And as for the community aesthetic, I believe this wall enhances it. It's a beautiful, custom-built structure. It adds value to my property, and it's perfectly legal." I pulled out a folder, thick with permits and carefully worded legal documents. "Landscaping and property beautification," I explained, tapping the folder with a flourish. "It's all right here." Mr. Henderson's shoulders slumped. He flipped through the documents, his face falling with each page. He knew he was defeated. The HOA, that bastion of suburban regulation, was powerless against my wall of petty revenge. It was a glorious moment, a symphony of legal loopholes and bureaucratic loopholes harmonizing to create a masterpiece of Karen-thwarting brilliance. Karen, realizing the HOA was a lost cause, resorted to her ultimate weapon, the police. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as a patrol car pulled up to the curb. 2 officers emerged, looking as bewildered as ever by the suburban drama unfolding before them. "Ma'am," the older officer addressed Karen, who was practically vibrating with indignation, "we received a call about a driveway dispute." "Dispute?" Karen shrieked, her voice echoing down the street. "This isn't a dispute. This man has built a wall to block my access to... She trailed off, realizing she had no legal leg to stand on. She couldn't exactly say my illegal parking spot. The officer turned to me, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Mr. Chris, can you explain the situation?" "Certainly, officer," I replied calmly. "My neighbor, Karen, has repeatedly parked in my private driveway despite my repeated requests for her to stop. This morning she blocked my car in, preventing me from going to work. I had her car towed. Now she's claiming I'm blocking her access." The officer nodded, his gaze shifting to the imposing brick wall. And this wall? A landscaping upgrade, I explained, for property beautification. Perfectly legal, with all the necessary permits. I gestured towards the folder I'd brought out again, just for show. The officer turned back to Karen, his expression now bordering on exasperation. Ma'am, from what I understand, this is Mr. Chris's private property. He has the right to control access to his driveway. If you don't have legal permission to park here, you'll need to find alternative parking. Karen sputtered, her face turning an alarming shade of purple. But it's not fair. Fair is a relative term, ma'am, the officer replied dryly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe we have more pressing matters to attend to. The officers returned to their car, leaving Karen standing there, humiliated and defeated. It was another public blow to her sense of entitlement, another victory for my petty revenge. But I wasn't finished. Oh no, I was just getting started. I had one final technologically advanced and utterly petty trick up my sleeve. I installed a motion-activated speaker, discreetly hidden within my newly landscaped and walled front yard. It was strategically positioned to trigger whenever Karen walked past, and it was loaded with a custom recording. "This is not your driveway, Karen!" A clear, authoritative voice boomed from the speaker every time she dared to approach my property. The effect was instantaneous. Karen would jump, startled by the unexpected announcement, her face contorting in a mixture of anger and embarrassment. The neighborhood, of course, found it hilarious. The "This is not your driveway, Karen" recording became a local catchphrase, a symbol of Karen's parking infamy. It was the perfect blend of pettiness and technology, a final, hilarious touch to my driveway defense. Karen, predictably, did not take her public humiliation lightly. Her attempts at retaliation, however, were as clumsy and ineffective as her parking skills. One night, my security cameras captured her sneaking around my property, a can of spray paint clutched in her hand. Her target? My beautiful brick wall, the symbol of her defeat. She managed to scrawl a single, barely legible word, "mean," before the motion-activated lights flicked on, startling her and sending her scurrying back to her house like a scolded child. The next morning, I filed a police report, providing the security footage as evidence. The officer who arrived, clearly amused by the situation, chuckled as he reviewed the video. "Looks like someone's not happy about your landscaping," he commented dryly. Karen received a citation for vandalism, another public mark on her already tarnished reputation. Undeterred, or perhaps just incredibly dense, Karen decided to take her revenge to the next level of petty. She began parking her car directly in front of my driveway, effectively blocking access even with the wall in place. It was a spiteful, childish act, clearly designed to inconvenience me. But Karen, in her blind rage, had forgotten one crucial detail. Parking in front of a driveway, even if it's walled off, is still illegal. The city's parking enforcement officers were more than happy to oblige my request for some assistance. Karen's car was ticketed repeatedly, each bright orange slip a further testament to her lack of self-awareness. She even received a boot on her wheel, a final humiliating touch that sent her into another round of public tantrums. The neighborhood, meanwhile, was thoroughly enjoying the show. My wall, my motion-activated speaker, and Karen's increasingly desperate attempts at revenge had become the stuff of local legend. Neighbors who had previously suffered under Karen's reign of HOA terror rallied behind me, offering their support and sharing their own Karen stories. It turned out I wasn't alone in my frustration. I was just the one who had finally dared to fight back. Eventually, the pressure became too much for Karen. The fines, the public ridicule, the constant reminders of her defeat. It was all too much to bear. She moved away, a blessing for the entire neighborhood, finally, that she had been defeated. Her reign of driveway tyranny was over, and to celebrate my victory, I threw a party. A big one. Right there in my newly gated-off driveway. The wall party, as it was dubbed by my neighbors, was a joyous occasion, a celebration of community, and a final, public mocking of Karen's pettiness. Everyone was invited, except, of course, Karen. The music was loud, the food was plentiful, and the laughter echoed down the street, a triumphant symphony of suburban justice. My driveway, once a battleground, had become a symbol of my victory, a space reclaimed, a testament to the power of petty revenge.